In the heart of Atlanta, Georgia, there lived a woman whose life was stitched together by struggle and resilience. Danielle Brooks had learned to wake up before dawn, not because she wanted to, but because survival demanded it. Her alarm clock rang at 4:30 every morning, the sound echoing through her small apartment like a reminder that dreams were a luxury she couldn't afford, at least not yet. By sunrise, Danielle was already dressed in her light blue nursing scrubs, standing by her kitchen window with a cup of instant coffee. The neighborhood outside was quiet, the kind of silence that existed only between shifts and sirens. She lived on the city's south side, where working-class families fought every day to make ends meet. To most, it was just another part of Atlanta, but to Danielle, it was home. Her apartment was small but tidy. On one wall hung a faded photo of her grandmother, Miss Thelma, the woman who had raised her after her mother passed away when she was only 10. Thelma's stern yet loving face was a constant reminder of strength, the kind Danielle carried like armor. Next to the photo, a short handwritten note read, "Keep your heart soft, even when the world is hard." Those words had guided her through every long night and weary morning. Danielle worked as a nursing assistant at a city hospital. It wasn't glamorous, and it certainly wasn't easy, but it gave her purpose. She was good with people, the elderly patients who called her sweetheart, the children who smiled when she walked in, and the tired nurses who relied on her to help keep the ward running. Most days, she barely had time to eat between double shifts, yet she never complained. Complaining didn't pay the bills, and kindness was her only wealth. After every shift, Danielle would walk the same route home, her sneakers pressing against the cracked sidewalks of Peachtree Avenue. Along the way, she passed a small park where children often played. Peachtree Park was no grand attraction, it was just a fenced patch of green with swings that squeaked in protest and a slide that looked like it had survived the 90s. Still, the laughter there had a way of softening her exhaustion. Watching those kids reminded her of something she'd lost years ago, innocence, maybe, or peace. There was one boy she saw often, maybe 7 or 8 years old, always running ahead of his mother. He had a baseball cap that looked too big for his head and a laugh that carried across the whole park. Danielle didn't know his name, but seeing him each afternoon became a quiet comfort. It made her feel connected to life outside the walls of hospitals and night shifts. One Thursday, as she passed the park, she slowed down for a moment, sitting on a nearby bench. The sun dipped low behind the oaks, spreading warm amber light across the playground. The sound of children playing mixed with the distant hum of traffic. For a fleeting moment, Danielle forgot the exhaustion in her bones. She thought about how different life could have been, how she might have gone to nursing school full-time, maybe even opened her own clinic. But dreams like that felt far away. Rent came first. Survival came first. Her phone buzzed. It was her friend and coworker, Janelle, texting her about an extra shift opening over the weekend. Danielle sighed softly, already knowing she'd take it. She couldn't say no to extra pay, even if it meant giving up her only day of rest. Before heading home, she took one last look at the park. The boy in the baseball cap was laughing again, running in circles as his mother called out, "Connor, slow down before you trip." Danielle smiled faintly. Something about that name, Connor, stuck in her mind. She didn't know why. Maybe it was the way his mother said it, full of love and worry at the same time. The bus ride home was quiet. The streets outside were dotted with neon signs and flickering lights from convenience stores. Danielle rested her head against the window, thinking about her grandmother's words again. Keep your heart soft. It sounded easy, but in truth, every act of kindness cost her something: time, energy, sometimes even peace of mind. Yet she couldn't stop being that way. It was who she was. When she arrived home, she unlocked the door to her apartment, letting the faint smell of lavender and detergent greet her. She tossed her bag on the couch, kicked off her shoes, and turned on the small TV. The evening news flickered with stories of shootings, politics, and rising rent. She muted it. Her world was loud enough already. In the corner of her apartment stood a half-finished painting, something she worked on when she had the strength. It was a portrait of a woman holding a lantern in the dark. She didn't paint often anymore, but every stroke of color gave her a strange sense of calm. That night, she stared at it for a while, then whispered, "One day, I'll finish you." Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the city. Atlanta storms were unpredictable. One moment the skies were clear, the next, rain would pour like heaven itself was crying. Danielle stood by the window, watching the first drops slide down the glass. Somewhere in the distance, she heard sirens, but that was nothing new. In this part of town, sirens were as common as the sound of crickets. She wrapped herself in a blanket, sat on her couch, and allowed the quiet to settle. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. Somewhere across the city, under the same rain-filled sky, a silver SUV idled outside a dark house. A man sat inside, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel, watching, waiting. Danielle had no idea that fate was already moving toward her, fast, silent, and unstoppable. Before Danielle Brooks ever learned how to save a life in a hospital, she learned how to survive one in a small house off Auburn Avenue, just a few miles from downtown Atlanta. The house had peeling white paint, creaking steps, and a garden that smelled of wild jasmine every spring. Inside those walls lived Thelma Brooks, her grandmother, a woman of quiet faith and steel strength, the kind of woman who didn't bend easily, not even when life tried to break her. Danielle had been 10 when she first came to live with her. Her mother, Angela, had passed unexpectedly after a long illness, leaving behind nothing but a few photographs and an old gold bracelet. Danielle had cried every night that first month, sometimes so hard she couldn't breathe. But Grandma Thelma didn't believe in letting sorrow linger. She'd say, "Baby, grief is a visitor. You let it come in, but don't you let it unpack." Thelma worked as a cook at a local school cafeteria. She was the kind of woman everyone respected, not because she was loud or proud, but because she meant what she said and said what she meant. She believed in discipline, hard work, and faith, but above all, kindness. Kindness, she'd often say, isn't for the world's applause. It's for your soul. Danielle would sit at the kitchen table every evening, watching her grandmother hum old gospel songs while cooking collard greens and cornbread. The radio played softly in the background, sermons, blues, or the news. The smell of food always wrapped the house in comfort, but Thelma's voice was what made it feel safe. "Remember, girl," she'd say, "hard times don't last, but hard hearts do. Don't let this world make yours like stone." Those words stuck. Even as a child, Danielle didn't fully understand them, but she could feel their truth. Life with Grandma Thelma was far from easy. They didn't have much. Some weeks, they barely scraped together the light bill, but Thelma refused to let Danielle see fear. She handled every setback like it was a passing storm. When the old roof leaked, she'd grab a bucket and say, "It's just the sky crying with us, baby. It'll pass." School wasn't simple either. Danielle was quiet, bookish, and often teased by classmates for wearing thrift store clothes. She'd come home some days, slam her backpack down, and swear she'd never go back. But Thelma would look up from her chair, lift one brow, and say, "Are you done feeling sorry, or do you need another minute?" That line always made Danielle laugh through her tears. Then Thelma would add, "You can't stop what people say, but you can decide if you let it stick." As the years passed, Danielle grew into a young woman with her grandmother's backbone, gentle but firm, soft-spoken but strong. She helped around the house, learned to cook, and even took a part-time job at the corner store when she was 16. Every dollar she earned, she'd bring home, and Thelma would smile, pat her hand, and tuck it away in a coffee tin labeled "Dreams." Danielle never asked what the money was for, but one evening, while cleaning the pantry, she found a folded note beneath the tin. It read, "For her nursing school one day. God willing." Tears filled her eyes. She realized that every sacrifice her grandmother made, every extra hour, every skipped meal, was to build something for her. Then came the year that changed everything. Thelma's health began to fail. It started small: shortness of breath, fatigue, forgetfulness. Danielle begged her to see a doctor, but Thelma brushed it off. "Just old bones, baby. Don't you worry." But one evening, Thelma collapsed while cooking. Danielle called 911, her hands trembling as she pressed her grandmother's chest, whispering, "Please, please stay with me." The ambulance came fast, but the silence in the hospital waiting room felt endless. Danielle sat there, clutching the bracelet her mother had left behind, praying to a God she wasn't sure still listened. Hours later, a doctor came out, his face solemn. The words blurred together: "Heart failure, complications, we did everything we could." Danielle went home alone that night. The house felt hollow without the sound of her grandmother's voice, without the smell of jasmine tea steeping on the stove. She sat in the old rocking chair, wrapped in her grandmother's quilt, staring at the empty kitchen. The note, "Keep your heart soft," hung on the fridge like a commandment. That night, she made herself a promise. She would live the way her grandmother had taught her, not for money or recognition, but for meaning. The years that followed were blurry. Danielle finished high school while working 2 jobs. Every step forward felt like walking uphill, but she kept going. She moved into a small apartment, enrolled in a local nursing program, and took on night shifts to afford tuition. There were days she thought about giving up, but she'd hear Thelma's voice in her head saying, "If it's worth doing tired, it's worth doing right." By the time Danielle turned 28, she had already endured more loss and responsibility than most people did in a lifetime. Yet her spirit remained unbroken. She didn't have a car, a partner, or much family left, but she had compassion, the kind that came from pain. Her co-workers at the hospital often joked that she was too nice for her own good. She'd smile, shrug, and say, "Kindness doesn't cost me anything." But deep down, she knew it did. It cost her energy, sometimes even sleep. But she couldn't change who she was. One Sunday morning, While walking through the neighborhood market, Danielle passed a woman struggling to carry her groceries to the bus stop. Without thinking, she ran over to help. The woman thanked her repeatedly, saying most people just passed her by. Danielle smiled softly. "Somebody once carried me too," she said. She didn't explain further. She didn't need to. That afternoon, she visited her grandmother's grave for the first time in months. The cemetery was quiet, the sky overcast, the air thick with the scent of rain and pine. She knelt beside the headstone, tracing her fingers over the engraved name. "I've been doing my best," she whispered. "I'm still working at the hospital. Still trying to help people. I know you said to keep my heart soft. I'm trying." A light breeze moved through the trees, scattering dry leaves across the grass. For a moment, she thought she could almost hear her grandmother's humming. As she stood to leave, something inside her felt different, lighter, like a quiet strength had returned. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she felt ready for it. That night, back in her apartment, the sky flashed with lightning. The sound of rain tapping against the window reminded her of home, of her grandmother's words, of faith through hardship. Danielle turned off the lights, curled beneath her blanket, and whispered a short prayer of gratitude. But somewhere in that same city, not too far away, a silver SUV rolled down a dimly lit street. Its driver's eyes were fixed, steady, and patient, watching, as though waiting for something, or someone. Danielle slept peacefully, unaware that her life was already drifting toward a moment that would test everything her grandmother had ever taught her. Morning sunlight crept through the narrow blinds of Danielle's apartment, painting thin golden lines across her modest living room. The clock on the wall ticked its familiar rhythm, not rushed, not slow, just steady, like her mornings always were. Danielle tied her scrubs at the waist, laced up her worn sneakers, and poured the last of her coffee into a paper cup. Her route to work never changed. From her small apartment on Auburn Avenue, she walked 2 blocks down to Peachtree Street, cut through a quiet park, and caught the number 52 bus that rolled past by 7:25 a.m. It wasn't a long walk, but it was the part of her day she cherished most, those few moments where life felt calm and predictable. The air that morning was warm, carrying that southern humidity Atlanta was famous for. It was the kind of weather that made the leaves shine under the light and children's laughter echo a little longer in the park. As Danielle walked past the old oak tree by the corner, she smiled at the familiar sight: parents chatting near the benches, a jogger with headphones, a man walking his golden retriever. Every face, every sound, every smell felt familiar. It was a small slice of peace in a world that rarely offered any. But that morning, something about the air felt different. It wasn't obvious. Just subtle enough that she couldn't quite explain it. Maybe it was the way the wind carried a faint metallic scent, or how the park, usually full of cheerful noise, seemed quieter than usual. Even the birds seemed hesitant to sing. Danielle brushed the thought aside. "You're overthinking again," she told herself. "It's just another workday." As she passed the playground, she caught sight of a small boy, maybe 5 or 6, playing alone near the swings. He wore a bright red shirt and had a tiny backpack shaped like a dinosaur. His laughter rang through the park, pure and carefree. She slowed her steps, smiling softly. Kids had always reminded her of hope, of second chances. She remembered what her grandmother used to say: "There's something holy about a child's laughter." It's the sound of a world that still believes. The boy's mother, or at least Danielle assumed it was his mother, sat a few yards away scrolling through her phone. Danielle thought nothing of it and continued her walk, but something caught her attention: a silver SUV parked unusually close to the curb. The engine was running. She frowned slightly. The driver's seat was empty. She glanced around. No one nearby seemed to notice. It wasn't unusual to see parked cars near the park, but an idling engine, no driver, and tinted windows? It gave her a strange feeling. Still, Danielle wasn't the type to jump to conclusions. Atlanta was a busy city, people parked oddly all the time. She shook off the unease and checked her phone. 7:18 a.m. She'd need to pick up her pace to make the bus. As she crossed the park's pathway, she heard a faint click behind her, like the sound of a car door opening. It was distant, maybe not even from the same direction, but it made her heartbeat stutter for a second. When she turned, everything looked normal. The boy was still laughing by the swings. The mother, still on her phone. The silver SUV still sitting there with its windows reflecting the morning light. She took a deep breath and kept walking. Her mind wandered as she walked to the bus stop. She thought about her shifts at the clinic, the night she helped deliver a baby when the power went out, the time she stayed past midnight comforting an old man who refused to die alone. Those moments made her feel alive, needed. But lately, something had been tugging at her heart. A restlessness. Like she was meant for something bigger but didn't know what it was yet. She reached the bus stop just as the 7:25 rounded the corner. A few familiar faces boarded: Mr. Harris, the retired postman who always carried a crossword; Melinda, the young mother juggling her toddler and a diaper bag. Danielle nodded politely as she climbed aboard and found her usual seat near the window. As the bus rolled away, her gaze drifted back toward the park. The silver SUV was still there. And now, the boy was gone. Danielle blinked, leaning closer to the glass. Maybe he'd just moved behind the trees. Maybe he'd run back to his mother. She looked for the woman on the bench, but the spot was empty. Her stomach twisted. The bus turned the corner, cutting off her view. She sat back, unsettled. Her mind tried to reason: maybe they left together, maybe nothing's wrong. But that unease she'd felt earlier wouldn't fade. It sat heavy in her chest, growing stronger by the second. She stared out the window for the rest of the ride, unable to shake the image of that empty swing swaying back and forth in the summer breeze. When she reached the clinic, she greeted her coworkers and forced a smile, diving into her duties. Blood pressure checks, patient charts, prescriptions. Her hands moved automatically, but her thoughts were elsewhere. By mid-afternoon, she told herself she'd imagined it all. But as she prepared to leave, her phone buzzed with a news alert. Local child missing near Peachtree Park, police investigating possible abduction. Her breath caught. She opened the article. There was no photo yet, no details released, just a short paragraph describing a young boy last seen wearing a red shirt and a dinosaur backpack. The same boy. Danielle's world went still. The hum of the clinic, the chatter of nurses, even her own heartbeat, it all faded into silence. She sat frozen, phone trembling in her hand. She could have done something. She should have done something. The article updated before her eyes. witnesses mentioned a silver SUV seen leaving the area around the same time. The same car. Her fingers went cold. That was the moment Danielle Brooks stopped being just a nursing assistant on her way to work. Something deep inside her shifted, a feeling she couldn't yet name, but it would guide every choice she made from that moment forward. Because sometimes, fate doesn't come with a warning. It comes with a whisper, a single decision, and a chance to prove who you really are when the world isn't watching. The next morning, Atlanta woke to the soft hum of traffic and distant sirens. To most people, it was just another weekday, another chance to beat the morning rush, grab a coffee, and move on with life. But for Danielle, sleep had been a stranger. She'd tossed and turned all night, her mind looping that image of the red shirt and the empty swing. Every creak of the apartment made her flinch. Her phone lay on the nightstand, the same headline still open, the words burned into her thoughts: child missing, Peachtree Park. When her alarm finally buzzed at 6, she didn't need it. She'd been awake long before it sounded. She got ready slowly that morning, each motion weighed down by the memory of yesterday. As she poured coffee, her hands trembled slightly. She hadn't realized how much that small boy's laughter had imprinted itself on her heart, how, for some reason, she couldn't let it go. On her way out, she paused at the door. Something in her gut told her not to take the usual route. But habits are hard to break. So she followed the same path, Auburn Avenue, then down Peachtree, through the small park. Only this time, the air felt heavier. Yellow police tape fluttered at the park's entrance. A news van was parked by the sidewalk, its antenna raised high. 2 officers stood near the playground, speaking to a woman who looked pale and distraught. Danielle froze. It was the same bench. The same swing. The same spot where that silver SUV had been idling just 24 hours ago. Her pulse quickened. She didn't want to look, but her eyes refused to move. The entire scene looked unreal, like watching a nightmare through glass. She overheard fragments of conversation as she passed. No witnesses, only one security camera nearby. Fathers offering a reward. SUV registered out of state. Every word made her feel smaller. Guilt crept in like a shadow she couldn't escape. She stood there for a moment, staring at the swing swaying in the morning breeze, when a police officer turned toward her. "Ma'am, this area's restricted. Please stay behind the tape." "Sorry," she murmured and took a step back. But before she could leave, the reporter by the news van called out, "Ma'am, did you happen to see anything yesterday morning?" Danielle hesitated. The question hit her like a weight. Did I? She'd seen the car. She'd seen the boy. She'd even felt that strange unease. But she hadn't done anything. Her throat tightened as she forced herself to speak. I walk through here every morning. I saw a boy yesterday, around 7, red shirt, dinosaur backpack." The reporter leaned closer. "Did you notice anyone else? Any vehicles?" Danielle's eyes darted to the officer now watching her closely. Her heart pounded. She could feel the sweat forming under her collar. "Yes," she finally said. "A silver SUV. Parked near the curb. Engine running." The officer stepped forward immediately. "Did you get a look at the driver, ma'am?" She shook her head. "No. The windows were tinted. He nodded and took out a small notepad. "Can you describe the vehicle in more detail?" Her voice wavered. "It was clean. Newer model. Maybe a Nissan Rogue or Ford Edge. It had out-of-state plates. I think from Alabama." The officer's pen froze mid-stroke. "You're sure about the plate?" "I'm not completely sure, but I think I saw the letters AL on the tag." He exchanged a quick glance with his partner, then looked back at her. "That helps, ma'am. Thank you." As they walked away, Danielle stood rooted to the ground, her heart still racing. For the first time since yesterday, she felt like she'd done something, even if it was small. But that sense of small relief didn't last long. That evening, after her shift, Danielle walked into her apartment exhausted. The air smelled faintly of rain and laundry detergent. She kicked off her shoes, set down her bag, and turned on the TV. The news anchor's voice filled the room. "Police continue searching for 6-year-old Connor Williams, missing since yesterday morning. Authorities believe he may have been abducted near Peachtree Park by an unknown suspect driving a silver SUV." There it was, the name. Connor Williams. A photo appeared on screen. The same boy, smiling with a gap-toothed grin, his red shirt bright as ever. Danielle felt tears sting her eyes. She turned off the TV, unable to look any longer. She sat in silence for a long time, staring at her reflection in the dark window. Atlanta's city lights flickered outside like restless stars. Something inside her whispered that this wasn't over, that somehow, her story and Connor's had just become intertwined. Around midnight, thunder rolled in the distance. The wind picked up, rattling the blinds. Danielle got up to close the window, and froze. There, faint but unmistakable, was the sound of tires screeching somewhere down the street. Followed by the hum of a car engine idling, just like before. She turned off the light and peered through the blinds. A silver SUV sat parked across the street, engine running. No headlights. No movement. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She blinked, once, twice. Then, just as suddenly, the SUV pulled away, disappearing into the night. She stood there long after it was gone, her breath shallow, her mind spinning with fear and disbelief. Coincidence, or warning? Either way, Danielle knew one thing for sure, something about that missing boy wasn't just another story on the news. It had found its way to her doorstep. Rain fell in thin, slanting lines across the city the next morning. It wasn't a storm, just a restless drizzle, the kind that blurred reflections on car windows and made the sidewalks glisten like glass. Danielle watched from her kitchen window as water trickled down the pane, her coffee cooling untouched beside her. Sleep hadn't visited her again. Every creak of the building, every distant horn had pulled her mind back to that silver SUV. She'd checked the street twice before dawn. Nothing. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that eyes had been watching from somewhere unseen. Her phone buzzed with another alert, Amber Alert update, search continues for 6-year-old Connor Williams. A new image had been added. The headline said he might have been taken across state lines. Danielle swallowed hard. She turned off the phone, grabbed her jacket, and stepped outside. She didn't know what she was expecting to find by retracing her route, but something deep inside urged her to go. Maybe she wanted closure, Or maybe her conscience wouldn't rest until she faced that park again. Peachtree Park was quieter than usual. The police tape had been removed, but the air still carried the heaviness of what had happened. Parents clutched their children a little tighter. The laughter that once filled the air now came in brief, nervous bursts. Danielle walked slowly along the path, eyes scanning everything, the trees, the benches, even the patch of grass near the swings. Every sound made her heart quicken. Then, she heard it. A faint cry. At first, she thought she'd imagined it, a trick of the wind. But then it came again, sharper this time, cutting through the drizzle. It wasn't far away. Danielle's breath caught. She turned toward the wooded area behind the park, a small stretch of overgrown trees leading toward an alley where few people ever went. The sound came again, a child's voice, trembling, muffled. Help! Her pulse thundered. Every instinct screamed to call the police, but something stronger pushed her forward. She tightened her grip on her phone and took a cautious step toward the trees. "Hello?" she called out softly. "Is someone there?" No answer. Only the whisper of rain hitting the leaves. She moved closer, her shoes sinking slightly into the damp ground. The smell of wet earth filled the air. Branches brushed against her shoulders as she pushed through the undergrowth. Then, there it was again. Clearer now. "Please, help me." It was a boy's voice. Her heart raced as she followed the sound, her eyes darting through the shadows until she saw it, a small figure crouched behind a fallen log. It was him. The red shirt, torn and muddy. The dinosaur backpack hanging loosely from one strap. His face was streaked with dirt, his eyes wide with fear. "Connor," she whispered, her voice breaking. The boy flinched, stepping back. "It's okay," she said quickly, lowering herself to his level. "My name's Danielle. I'm here to help you. You're safe now, okay?" He shook his head violently. "He's coming back." Before she could ask who, the sound of footsteps echoed through the trees, slow, deliberate, crunching on wet leaves. Danielle's blood ran cold. Through the rain and mist, a tall figure emerged, black jacket, hood pulled low, moving with chilling calm. The man's voice came out low and smooth. "Step away from the boy." Danielle's instincts screamed run, but her body refused to move. The boy clung to her sleeve, trembling. "I said step away," the man repeated, taking another step forward. Danielle's eyes darted around, no one else in sight, no open path but the one behind her. She could barely think over the sound of her pounding heart. "Please," she said, voice shaking, "the police are already looking for him. Don't make this worse." The man chuckled softly, a sound so cold it made her shiver. "You shouldn't have come here." And then, he lunged. Danielle pushed Connor behind her and swung her bag hard, catching the man across the arm. He stumbled but didn't fall. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. She fought, twisting and kicking, the struggle raw and desperate. Connor screamed. "Run," she shouted. "Run to the street." The boy hesitated, terrified, until she yelled again, louder this time. "Go!" He bolted toward the edge of the trees. The man tried to follow, but Danielle threw herself in front of him, blocking his path. His fist caught her shoulder, pain shooting down her arm. She stumbled, gasping, but still grabbed at him again, clawing at his jacket. "Let him go," she cried. For a brief moment, their eyes met, hers filled with fury, his with cold detachment. Then came the sound of sirens. The man froze. Somewhere beyond the park, flashing lights pierced through the rain. He cursed under his breath and turned to run, vanishing into the shadows before the police arrived. Danielle collapsed to her knees, trembling, her breath coming in sharp bursts. The sound of boots and voices surrounded her. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" She looked up, rain mixing with tears on her face. "He's gone, he ran that way," she pointed toward the trees. But when she looked around, Connor was safe. 2 officers were wrapping him in a blanket, guiding him toward a patrol car. The boy turned to look at her one last time before being led away, his small hand lifting in a silent wave. And just like that, he was gone again, this time, not in fear, but in safety. Danielle sat there, drenched, shaking, and completely still. She didn't yet know that her name would soon be on every news broadcast. That strangers across the country would call her the woman who risked everything to save a child. All she knew, in that single breathless moment, was that she had done what she couldn't do yesterday, she'd acted. But even as the sirens faded and the rain slowed to a mist, something deep inside whispered that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The park had never felt louder, yet somehow quieter. Sirens echoed through the trees, their wailing mixing with the pounding of Danielle's heartbeat. Her knees pressed into the wet ground, her scrubs soaked through with rain and mud. She could still feel the stranger's grip on her wrist, the raw imprint of his strength, the cold rage in his eyes. Even now, her hand trembled where he'd held her. The sound of his voice echoed in her mind, "You shouldn't have come here." Officers moved quickly around her, flashlights slicing through the mist. Radios crackled. Someone shouted directions. The scene blurred together in flashes of blue and red light. Danielle blinked rain from her lashes, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Connor was safe, that was all that mattered. But somewhere in those woods, the man who had taken him was still out there. A female officer crouched beside her. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Danielle nodded weakly. He went that way," she said, pointing toward the dark line of trees beyond the playground. "Do you know who he was?" She shook her head. "No. He came out of nowhere. He said I shouldn't have come." The officer's radio crackled again. "Suspect heading east through the trees. Male, mid-30s, black jacket, possible weapon." More units flooded the park, their lights cutting across the rain-slicked grass. Parents clutched their children, gathering near the sidewalks, whispering in shock as the news spread through the small crowd. The missing boy had been found. But Danielle wasn't ready to celebrate. Something deep inside her whispered that it wasn't finished. As the medics approached, she tried to stand, but her legs wobbled. Pain flared through her shoulder where she'd been hit. "I'm fine," she insisted, brushing off their hands. "Just check on the boy." Connor sat wrapped in a blanket beside one of the patrol cars. His small frame looked even smaller under the flashing lights. An officer knelt beside him, speaking softly. When he spotted Danielle, his eyes lit up. He tried to run toward her, but the officer gently held him back. "Easy, buddy, let's get you to the ambulance first." Danielle gave him a faint smile, one that said, "You're safe now, it's okay." The female officer reappeared, notebook in hand. "Ma'am, we'll need a statement from you before you go anywhere." Danielle nodded, wiping a streak of water from her cheek. "Of course." As she spoke, her eyes kept drifting toward the tree line. Something about the way the shadows moved made her uneasy. Every now and then, she thought she saw the flicker of movement, a silhouette darting just out of view. The officer noticed her glance. "Don't worry, ma'am. We've got a perimeter set up. He's not getting far." But Danielle wasn't convinced. The man's face, the cold calm in his eyes, he hadn't looked like someone who panicked. He looked like someone who planned. And people who plan, come back. After giving her statement, she was guided toward a police car to dry off. The rain had eased, but the clouds hung heavy overhead. She sat in the back seat, staring through the windshield as medics loaded Connor into an ambulance. His small hand waved at her again through the glass, his eyes filled with gratitude. A lump formed in her throat. She didn't see herself as brave. She'd just done what she couldn't live with ignoring a second time. But bravery doesn't ask for permission, it just happens, in the moments when fear meets purpose. The officer opened the door. "You're free to go, ma'am. You did good today." Danielle stepped out slowly, her knees still weak. "Do they know who he is?" she asked. "Not yet," the officer said. "But we're checking nearby cameras and traffic footage. Someone's bound to have seen that vehicle." She nodded silently, then started the walk home. The park behind her buzzed with sirens, voices, and the rhythmic thud of boots in mud, a storm of human motion. But halfway down the street, something made her stop. Her reflection glimmered faintly in a storefront window, and just over her shoulder, across the street, parked under a flickering streetlight, sat a silver SUV. No sirens. No police. No lights. Just quiet. Her pulse quickened. She turned slowly, scanning the area, but no one was inside. The driver's seat was empty again. Then, as lightning flashed in the distance, she saw it, a faint smudge on the passenger window. Written with a finger in the condensation. "You should have minded your business." Danielle's heart nearly stopped. She stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat. When she looked again, a single raindrop slid down the glass, erasing the message completely. But it didn't matter. She'd seen it. And she knew, with chilling certainty, this wasn't over. The man hadn't run. He was still watching. Somewhere out there, hidden behind that rain-soaked night, someone had marked her as a problem that needed to disappear. The city didn't sleep that night. Not after the news broke, missing child found in local park after violent encounter. The headlines rolled in before dawn, flashing across every screen in the diner windows, echoing through radio broadcasts and phone notifications. For most people, it was just another story, a strange mix of fear and relief wrapped into a headline. But for Danielle, it was personal. She hadn't slept. Not even for a minute. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that message again, fogged on the glass, fading under the rain. "You should have minded your business." The words haunted her like a whisper she couldn't unhear. She sat at her small kitchen table, a mug of untouched coffee trembling slightly in her hand. Outside, the city was waking, cars moving through puddles, dogs barking, early joggers bundled in jackets. The normal rhythm of life carried on as if nothing had happened. But to her, everything had changed. Every creak of the apartment made her flinch. Every passing car made her peek through the blinds. She'd locked the door twice, checked the windows 3 times. Still, it didn't feel like enough. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Her heart skipped. She hesitated, staring at the screen, then finally swiped to answer. Hello? Silence. Then, a faint sound. Breathing. Slow. Steady. Too deliberate. Who is this? She asked, trying to sound firm though her throat tightened. A low voice came through, muffled, almost like static. You should have left it alone. Her stomach turned cold. Who is this? But the line went dead. The mug slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. Coffee splashed across the tiles like spilled blood. She stepped back, hand trembling, and grabbed her phone again, dialing the police this time. Danielle Brooks, she said when the operator picked up. The woman from the park incident last night, someone just called me. The operator's tone sharpened. Do you believe it was the same person involved? Yes. I'm sure of it. Stay inside, Ms. Brooks. Officers are on their way. She hung up and stared at the door, heart hammering. Minutes crawled by like hours. When the knock finally came, she jumped. 2 detectives stood at her door, both in plain clothes but carrying that unmistakable tension that follows a case already under pressure. Detective Raines, tall, quiet, with tired eyes, was the first to speak. Ms. Brooks, I'm Detective Raines, and this is my partner, Detective Keller. We understand you received a call this morning? Danielle nodded, leading them inside. It was the same voice, she said. The one from last night. Raines took out a small recorder. Can you describe exactly what he said? She repeated the words, every syllable etched in her memory. You should have left it alone. The detective paused, exchanging a look with his partner. We're tracing the number now. It was an unregistered prepaid line, common for people trying to stay off-grid. Keller added, it could be connected to the abduction case, but we're not ruling out other angles yet. Sometimes people get obsessed when stories like this go public. Danielle frowned. You think it's just someone random? Raines shook his head. No. Someone wanted you scared. That's deliberate. He closed his notebook. We'll have a patrol car swing by your block for the next few nights. Keep your phone close, and if he contacts you again, don't answer, just call us. Danielle nodded numbly. Thank you. As the detectives left, she locked the door behind them, pressing her forehead against the wood. For a moment, the apartment was silent again, the kind of silence that hums beneath the surface, heavy with things unsaid. Then, from somewhere beyond the wall, faint music started playing. A child's lullaby. Soft. Slow. The same melody she'd heard at the park when she found Connor crying. Her blood ran cold. She turned toward the sound, it was coming from her living room window. She crept closer. Outside, across the street, a car idled quietly. The headlights were off, but she could see the faint glow of a phone screen inside. Someone was sitting there, watching. Her heart pounded so hard she could barely breathe. She took a step back, reaching for her phone, but before she could dial, the car engine revved and pulled away into the fog. Danielle stood frozen, the soft echo of the lullaby still drifting through the night air. She didn't know how he found her. She didn't know what he wanted. But one thing was certain. He wasn't finished. 2 days had passed since the call, since the sleepless night when a stranger's voice had crawled through the phone line and left Danielle trembling. The police had come and gone, leaving behind nothing but a sense of watchful quiet. Patrol cars still circled her block occasionally, but each time the flashing blue lights faded away, the silence grew heavier. Then, that morning, her phone rang again, but this time, it wasn't a stranger. "Ms. Brooks? This is Dr. Hanley from St. Mary's Medical Center. I believe you were involved in the incident with a young boy named Connor Ward?" Danielle straightened up, heart pounding. "Yes. Is he all right?" "He's physically fine, but," the doctor hesitated. "He's been having trouble sleeping. He keeps asking for you, says you're the only one he trusts." Her throat tightened. "He asked for me?" "Yes, ma'am. His mother's here, but he won't talk to anyone. We thought maybe you could come by." Danielle didn't need time to think. "I'll be there." When she arrived, the hospital lobby smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. The air buzzed with the quiet hum of monitors and nurses' footsteps echoing down polished floors. A nurse led her through a narrow hallway and stopped outside a small recovery room. Inside, a boy sat on the edge of the bed, clutching a stuffed bear. His eyes, bright but distant, flickered toward the door when she entered. Connor looked smaller than she remembered. His hair was still messy, his hands fidgeting with the bear's paw. The nurse smiled softly. "He hasn't said much to anyone, but when we told him you were here," she opened the door wider. He smiled for the first time. Danielle's heart clenched. "Hey, buddy," she said quietly, stepping closer. Connor's lips trembled into a small smile. "You came." "Of course," she replied. "How are you feeling?" He shrugged, eyes lowering to his bear. "They keep asking me questions." "That's because they want to help." He shook his head. "They don't know what he looks like." Danielle froze. "Who?" Connor hesitated, then whispered, "The man who took me." The air between them grew still. Danielle sat beside him, lowering her voice. "Can you tell me what you remember?" He took a shaky breath. "He told me my mom sent him. He knew her name. He even had a picture of us." Her pulse quickened. "Did he say anything else?" Connor nodded slowly. "He said he used to know someone named Danielle Brooks." The room spun. "What did you say?" Connor looked up, innocent and serious. "That's what he said. He said you ruined his life." Her stomach turned to stone. She stared at him, words caught in her throat. "Connor, did he tell you who he was?" Connor frowned, thinking. "He said his name was Thomas. Thomas something." Danielle felt the color drain from her face. "Thomas." She hadn't heard that name in almost 10 years. Detective Rain's voice echoed in her mind. Someone wanted you scared. Now she understood why. Connor's mother, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes named Rachel Ward, entered the room just then. "Connor, honey, are you okay?" The boy nodded quietly. Rachel turned to Danielle. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. "You saved him." Danielle shook her head. "I just did what anyone would do." Rachel's voice cracked. "No. No one else did." Her phone buzzed in her purse. She glanced at it briefly, then frowned. "Sorry, excuse me for a second." As Rachel stepped out, Danielle turned back to Connor. He was drawing on a scrap of paper the nurse had given him. She leaned closer, curious, and froze again. He was sketching a car. Not just any car, a dark SUV with tinted windows. And on the back window, in shaky letters, he'd written, "You should have minded your business." Her hand trembled. "Connor, where did you see this?" He looked up, voice barely a whisper. "He used to park outside my school." A chill ran through her. This wasn't random. The man, Thomas, had known her. And now, somehow, he'd gone after a child. But why Connor? Before she could ask more, the door opened again, but this time it wasn't Rachel or the nurse. Detective Rains stepped in, holding a folder. His expression was unreadable. "Ms. Brooks," he said, "we need to talk." Danielle looked at him, her voice barely steady. "About Thomas?" Rains paused, his eyes narrowing. "So you remember him too?" The words hit her like a punch. She hadn't told anyone that name yet. "How do you?" He set the folder down on the table, opening it just enough for her to see the photo clipped inside. It was the same man she'd once known, older now, his eyes hollow, his face marked with anger. Rains said quietly, "He's not just after you, Danielle. He's been looking for you for years." Danielle's breath caught in her chest as she stared at the photo lying on the hospital table. The man in the picture, the one Detective Rains called Thomas, looked both familiar and distant, like a ghost from a life she thought she'd buried long ago. The detective's voice was calm, but his eyes studied her carefully. "I take it that name means something to you." She swallowed hard. "It used to." Rains leaned forward slightly. "We found some old records. Employment files, reports from 10 years back. Looks like you both worked at a logistics firm in Atlanta." Her eyes fell to the floor. "Yes. I was 23. It was my first real job after college." "Thomas worked in the same department. Can you tell me what happened between you two?" Danielle hesitated. The walls felt like they were closing in, the soft hum of hospital machines suddenly too loud. "It started out fine," she said quietly. "He was friendly, helpful. Everyone liked him. But after a while, he changed. Became possessive, jealous. I didn't even know why. I was seeing someone else then." Rains nodded slowly. "You filed a complaint against him?" "Yes. He started following me home. Sending flowers to my apartment. I thought it was harmless until one night, I caught him outside my door, just standing there." Rain's eyes narrowed. Did he ever threaten you? Danielle took a shaky breath. Not directly. But he said something I'll never forget: "You'll regret making me invisible." The detective flipped through his folder. After that, he was terminated. 2 weeks later, he vanished. No forwarding address, no contact. Until now. Danielle felt a chill crawl down her spine. You think he's behind the kidnapping? Rains closed the folder. We can't confirm that yet. But it's clear he's been watching you for some time. The call, the message on the window, now the boy mentioning his name, it's not coincidence. She rubbed her arms as if trying to shake off the weight of it all. Why go after a child though? Why not just come for me? Rains sighed. People like him, they don't think in straight lines. Hurting someone you care about, or even a stranger you saved, can feel like punishment in their mind. Control. The room fell silent for a long moment. Then, Connor's quiet voice broke the stillness. He said you were the reason he lost everything. Danielle turned toward the boy, her throat tightening. What do you mean? Connor fiddled with his bear. He said you got him fired. That you made everyone hate him. She looked down, guilt pressing heavy on her chest. I didn't make him lose anything. He did that himself. Rain stood. Ms. Brooks, we'll have officers keep an eye on you for now. But I need to ask, do you have anyone close to you? Family, friends, anyone who should know what's happening? She shook her head. No. It's just me. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right. Don't go anywhere without letting us know first. As he left, Danielle sat there motionless, her mind drifting back through time, to a memory she hadn't let herself revisit in years. It was 2015. She remembered the smell of rain on the pavement outside the office building, the fluorescent lights flickering inside. She'd been staying late that night, finishing reports. Everyone had gone home except her and Thomas. He'd come to her desk with that familiar smile, polite, friendly, but wrong somehow. You shouldn't be here alone, he'd said softly. I'm fine, Thomas. I just need to finish this. He'd leaned closer, lowering his voice. You know, people don't appreciate you the way I do. She'd forced a smile and packed her things. Good night, Thomas. When she turned to leave, he'd caught her wrist. Not hard, just enough to make her stop. Don't ignore me, Danielle, he whispered. You'll regret it. She pulled away, heart racing. That was the night she went to HR. And that was the night everything changed. Back in the present, Danielle stood by the hospital window, watching rain streak down the glass. Her reflection looked older than she remembered, weary, but still standing. Connor's words echoed in her head. He said you ruined his life. Maybe, in his twisted mind, she had. But as the rain fell harder outside, another sound joined the storm, the distant hum of an engine. She turned and looked down into the hospital parking lot. A black SUV sat idling by the curb. No headlights. No movement. Her breath caught. Then, as if sensing her gaze, the driver's door opened slowly. Someone stepped out, holding an umbrella. Even from that distance, she could see his face. Older, thinner, but unmistakable. Thomas. He looked up at her window, smiled faintly, and lifted a finger to his lips. Shoo. Then he got back into the SUV and drove away into the rain. Morning light leaked through thin curtains, silvering the quiet of Danielle's apartment. She had barely slept after seeing Thomas in the parking lot. Every sound in the building, the elevator groaning, a door closing down the hall, made her pulse jump. Her phone buzzed just after 7. Detective Rains. "Ms. Brooks," his voice came brisk but tired, "we traced the number that called you last time. It's linked to a cell tower on the east side, near the old freight district. You ever go there?" She thought for a second. "Not in years." "That's what worries me," he said. "We're sending a team, but I'd like you to come down to the precinct today. There's something you should see." At the station, Rains met her with 2 coffees and the look of someone who hadn't gone home either. On his desk sat a stack of photos, maps, and printouts of security footage. He slid one photo across the table. It showed a small storage unit complex, chain-link fence, cracked asphalt, a faded sign that read Eastline Rentals. "We found this unit rented under a fake name," Rains said. "But the payment trail leads back to Thomas Greer." "Recognize the name?" Danielle nodded faintly. "Greer, yeah. That was his mother's maiden name." He handed her another photo. Inside the unit, a wall covered with pictures. Most were of her. At her old workplace. On a subway platform. Standing outside her apartment 3 months ago. Her voice broke. "He's been following me since Atlanta." "Looks that way," Rains said quietly. "He kept everything, articles, employee rosters, even your volunteer schedules. He's been patient. Years of it." Danielle's hands shook as she flipped through the pile. In one photo she noticed something that made her stop, a flyer pinned behind the images. It was from a children's foundation she used to volunteer with. "That's where I met Rachel Ward," she whispered. Rains frowned. "Connor's mom?" "Yes. We met at a fundraising fair 2 years ago. She mentioned working downtown at the same logistics branch Thomas once applied to." The detective exhaled. "So the connection isn't random. He chose Connor because of her link to you." Danielle stared at the photo wall again, the pieces twisting together in her mind like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. A young officer knocked on the door, holding a laptop. "Sir, you need to see this. We pulled security from the storage lot." On the screen, grainy footage showed Thomas entering the unit a week before the kidnapping. He carried a small box and taped something beneath the table. The next frame showed him leaving without it. "What's in the box?" Danielle asked. The officer zoomed in, letters, photos, and a phone. Rains leaned closer. "We found that phone earlier this morning. It had only one unsent message saved in drafts." He opened a printed copy and slid it across the table. It read, "You took everything from me once. Now I'll take everything you care about." Danielle's breath hitched. "He thinks I care about Connor." "Or he wants you to," Rains said. "He's provoking you, making you part of his game." She pressed her palms together, steadying her voice. "Then end it. Please. Before he hurts anyone else." Rains nodded. "We will. But there's something else you should hear." He picked up his phone and played a short audio clip recovered from the same device. The sound was faint at first, wind, footsteps, and then a voice speaking low, calm, deliberate. "She'll come looking for him. She always does the right thing. That's her weakness." The room went silent. Danielle's eyes widened. "He's been predicting my moves." Rain set the phone down. "Which means he's watching right now. We'll keep protection on you, but until we locate him, I need you to stay somewhere safe." "Where?" He hesitated. "We'll arrange a safe house outside the city. Tonight." Danielle nodded slowly, but inside she knew it wasn't that simple. Thomas wasn't just after her. He wanted her to remember. As she left the precinct, a sense of unease followed her down the steps. Parked across the street, half hidden behind a delivery van, was another black SUV. Her phone buzzed again. A new text message from an unknown number lit the screen. "Running won't change what you did." Danielle froze on the sidewalk, the phone trembling in her hand. Above her, thunder rolled through the gray sky. She whispered to herself, "What I did?" The question hung heavy, unanswered, as rain began to fall. The safe house was nothing like the word promised. A two-bedroom cottage on the edge of Dutch Creek, surrounded by wet pine and fog, it felt more like a waiting room between fear and calm. Detective Rains had driven her there himself, headlights slicing through rain until the city lights disappeared behind them. Inside, everything smelled of dust and detergent. A single lamp, a sagging sofa, curtains thick enough to block the world. "This is temporary," Rain said, dropping her duffel on the table. "We'll rotate officers on watch outside. There's food in the fridge, clean sheets, and a landline if you need us." She nodded, silent. He hesitated at the door. "He's baiting you, Danielle. Don't let him win." Then he left, and the cottage fell quiet. She moved through the rooms slowly, touching the chipped furniture as if it could steady her. On the dresser sat a small box of old household items, books, candles, and a battered tape recorder left by previous tenants. She almost smiled, the relic seemed out of place in a digital world. Night came fast. The woods pressed against the windows. Somewhere outside, crickets hummed and water dripped from the porch roof. Danielle brewed tea, sat by the window, and tried not to look at her phone. But fear has a way of whispering. Her screen blinked to life again, a new message from an unknown number. "You remember the River House?" Her heart stopped. The River House, a nickname she and Thomas once used for an old company cabin where they'd attended a retreat years ago. She hadn't thought of it since. Another text arrived seconds later. "That's where it ended. That's where you lied." Danielle's hands trembled as she dialed Rains. No signal. She ran to the landline, dead. Outside, headlights flared briefly through the trees, then vanished. She backed away from the window, breath shallow. The silence deepened until every creak of wood sounded like footsteps. Then came the faintest sound, the crackle of the old tape recorder on the dresser. It had turned on by itself. Through static, a voice emerged. Her voice. "This is Danielle Brooks. If anyone hears this, I..." The tape cut off. She stared at it, horror creeping through her veins. She had never made that recording. Morning brought thin sunlight through mist. Rains arrived just after dawn, pounding on the door. "You all right?" Danielle told him everything, the messages, the headlights, the tape. He listened, jaw tight. "We'll sweep the property." "But that tape, where is it?" She pointed to the dresser. The machine sat silent now. Rains lifted it carefully, pressed play. Nothing but hiss. "Could be a trick," he said. "Or he got inside before we secured the place. How would he know where I am?" He sighed. "We're checking our own people. Until then, we keep moving." She shook her head. "No. The message mentioned the river house. He wants me there. That's exactly why you can't go." But the look in her eyes said she would anyway. By afternoon, she was back in the passenger seat of Rains's car, following a winding road that cut through tall trees and ended at a stretch of gray water. The cabin waited at the edge, wood warped, windows clouded, roof half-caved. "This place has been abandoned for years," Rains murmured, stepping out first. Danielle followed slowly. Every board groaned beneath her feet as she entered. Dust floated in thin beams of light. She remembered laughter once filling these rooms, co-workers, chatter, a younger version of herself believing life was simple. Now it smelled of mildew and old paper. In the main room, on the floor, sat another small box. Rains knelt and lifted the lid. Inside were photographs, her and Thomas at the retreat, smiling, unaware of what would come. And under those, a sealed envelope marked for her. He handed it to her. "Your call." Danielle opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single note written in familiar, sharp handwriting. "Truth always floats back to the surface. Meet me where the river bends." Rains cursed under his breath. "He's close." They stepped outside. The woods were silent except for the rush of water nearby. Following a narrow trail, they reached the bend, a clearing where the river widened, slow and glassy. On the opposite bank, a figure stood watching. Even from that distance she recognized him, older, gaunter, eyes sunken but bright with something between fury and nostalgia. Thomas raised a hand, not in greeting but in accusation. "You told them I hurt you," he shouted across the water. "You destroyed me." Rains drew his weapon, calling out for him to stay put. Thomas ignored it. "Tell him the truth, Danielle. Tell him what you did." Her pulse thundered. "You followed me. You scared me." He shook his head. "You knew I loved you. And you used it." Rains shouted again, but Thomas's voice drowned the echo of his command. "She lied to save herself," Thomas said. "And now she gets to be the hero." Danielle felt tears sting her eyes. It wasn't a lie. But Thomas only smiled, a broken, bitter smile, and stepped backward toward the river's edge. "We'll see if they believe you this time." Then he vanished into the trees before Rains could cross. Danielle stood trembling, staring at the rippling water where his reflection had been. Rains lowered his weapon slowly. "Whatever happened here, it's not over." She whispered, almost to herself, "No. It's starting all over again." The drive back from the river felt endless. The rain had started again, thin lines on the windshield, but inside the car the silence was heavier than the storm. Danielle sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her phone buzzed twice in her jacket pocket, but she didn't look. Every message now felt like a trap waiting to be opened. Rains kept his eyes on the road, but she could feel the questions building in him like pressure in a sealed pipe. Finally, he broke the silence. "Danielle, what really happened between you and Thomas Keller?" She turned her face toward the window. "I told you already. He crossed a line. He wouldn't stop following me." Rains nodded slowly. "And the report back then, the one that ended his career. It was based only on your statement?" She looked at him sharply. "You think I made it up?" He shook his head. "No. But I think there's more to it than you've said." The words stung. She wanted to defend herself, to shout that she was the victim, but the truth was messier than the story she'd told the world. She could still remember the look in Thomas's eyes that night, not of rage, but of betrayal. When they reached the city, Rains parked in front of the precinct. "Come inside," he said. "We'll review the old case files together. Maybe we'll find something that explains why he's resurfaced now." She followed him reluctantly. Inside, the station buzzed with quiet activity, phones ringing, officers typing reports, the smell of stale coffee thick in the air. Rains led her to an archive room lined with gray filing cabinets. He pulled one drawer open, scanning through labeled folders until he found it: Keller, Thomas A. The file was thin. Too thin. Rains frowned. "Half of this is missing." "What do you mean missing?" "I mean someone removed most of the internal memos, emails, the HR statements, even the settlement document." He looked at her. "You didn't touch this, did you?" She shook her head. "I haven't seen that file since the case closed." Rains exhaled slowly. "Then someone doesn't want us finding what's in here." Danielle felt a cold shiver climb her spine. "Do you think it's him?" He hesitated. "Maybe. Or someone who still believes his side of the story." She bit her lip, staring down at the thin folder. "You think he's trying to make me confess to something?" "Could be. Or he's trying to rewrite what happened." He handed her one of the remaining pages. It was an old incident report, her handwriting, her statement from 7 years ago. She read the lines aloud quietly, her voice trembling. "Thomas Keller cornered me after the company dinner. He said he loved me. When I rejected him, he grabbed my wrist and wouldn't let go. He said he could make my career disappear if I didn't give him a chance." Her breath hitched. She could see it again, the conference hall lights dimmed, the smell of cologne and champagne, his shadow falling across her. But the next part blurred in her mind. She remembered struggling, a fall, then people shouting. "Danielle," Rains said gently. "You okay?" She blinked. "I don't remember what happened after that." He studied her face. "You sure?" She hesitated, trying to piece the fragments together. A sharp noise, glass shattering, her own voice screaming, or was it his? Then, like a sudden flash, she saw it, Thomas slipping, hitting his head on the edge of the bar. Blood. Panic. Someone pulling her back. Her pulse raced. I might have hurt him." Rains's expression hardened. "That wasn't in the report." "I didn't know, she whispered. The HR people told me to stick to my statement. They said he was already under investigation for harassment. They said it would be easier if I didn't mention the accident. Rains rubbed his forehead. So they buried part of the story to protect the company. Danielle nodded weakly. And they told me never to speak of it again. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the truth hung between them like thick smoke. Then Rains said quietly, "If Keller knows the truth, if he knows you were part of that cover-up, he's not after revenge. He's after vindication." Danielle swallowed hard. He wants everyone to know he wasn't the monster they made him. And that makes him dangerous, Rains added. Because people who lose everything to a lie, don't stop until they get it back. Danielle's gaze drifted to the window. The city outside glowed in dull gray light. She felt something between dread and guilt settle deep in her chest. What if he's right, she murmured. What if I did ruin his life? Rains looked at her, but his voice stayed firm. You survived something traumatic. That's not the same as being guilty. She nodded slowly, but the words didn't settle. The truth had started to shift beneath her feet, and she could no longer tell what was solid and what wasn't. As they left the archive room, Rains's phone buzzed. He frowned, checked the screen, then froze. What is it? Danielle asked. He turned the phone for her to see. It was a photo message, grainy, dark, but unmistakable. The picture showed them inside the archive room, taken from outside the window. At the bottom of the image were 3 words. Still watching you. For a few seconds, neither Danielle nor Rains could speak. The photo on his phone glowed coldly between them, a silent message, proof that someone had been close enough to see them, close enough to listen. Rains's first move was instinctive. He shut off his phone, then crossed the office and yanked the blinds down. No one leaves the building, he ordered a nearby officer. We've got a breach. Danielle stood still, her hands trembling. He's here, isn't he? Rains didn't answer. He motioned to another detective, who immediately started pulling up the precinct's security feeds. The monitors flickered to life, showing the outside lot, hallways, and entrances. Check every angle, Rains said sharply. Danielle took a step closer to one of the screens. Rain drizzled outside, painting silver streaks over the grainy footage. Cars passed. Officers walked in and out. Everything looked normal, until one frame glitched for a second. There, she said, pointing. Rewind that. The tech reversed a few seconds. The camera focused on a dark sedan parked near the east gate. For just a heartbeat, the driver's face was visible before the camera lost focus again. It was him. Thomas Keller. Rains swore under his breath. He's getting bold. He's playing with us, Danielle whispered. Rains nodded grimly. And he's watching how we react. He turned to her. We're moving you again, tonight. Danielle's voice cracked. Where could I possibly be safer than inside a police station? Somewhere he doesn't expect you to go, Rains said. Somewhere off the grid. By nightfall, they were on the move. An unmarked SUV carried them north, away from the city lights, through winding roads that cut between fields and pine trees. The only sound was the hum of the tires and the low beat of the windshield wipers. Danielle sat in the back seat, watching raindrops chase each other down the glass. Her mind replayed the image of Keller in that car, the same calm eyes that once looked at her across a conference table, now filled with something colder. She thought of all the times she'd seen a shadow behind her or heard footsteps that vanished when she turned. Maybe it hadn't been paranoia after all. After nearly 2 hours, they reached a small cabin hidden behind a line of old trees. It belonged to one of Raines's retired colleagues, a place Keller couldn't trace through city systems or surveillance grids. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and dust. The lights flickered weakly when Raines flipped the switch. "This will have to do for now," he said. "No phones, no Wi-Fi. Just quiet." Danielle gave a small, uneasy laugh. "Quiet's not exactly comforting anymore." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, I get that." They sat at the wooden table with a pot of coffee and an old map stretched between them. Raines traced his finger along the routes Keller might have used to follow them. "He's meticulous," Raines muttered. "Every move he makes is calculated. If he got that photo inside the station, he either has help, or he's inside our system." Danielle frowned. "Inside the police system? Maybe a hacker, maybe a leak. Either way, he's ahead of us." She looked up at him. "Then how do we stop someone who's always 2 steps ahead?" Raines didn't answer immediately. "By making him think we're where he wants us, while we go somewhere else." Danielle raised an eyebrow. "You mean bait?" "Exactly." He leaned back. "If he's tracking you, then you're the key to leading him out." Her pulse quickened. "You want to use me as bait?" Raines met her eyes. "I'll never let you be alone. But yes, we'll control the narrative. We'll make him reveal himself." Later that night, while Raines made a call from the porch, Danielle wandered through the cabin. The floor creaked softly under her feet. She stopped by an old bookshelf filled with forgotten paperbacks and dusty photo frames. One of them caught her eye, a picture of a woman and a boy standing near a fishing dock. The boy looked familiar, though she couldn't place why. Then she noticed something scratched faintly into the frame, 4TK. Her breath hitched. T.K. Thomas Keller. She turned the frame over. There, in faint marker, was a date, April 2015. The same year she'd left Atlanta. Her mind raced. Why was his name here, in this cabin miles from anywhere? Before she could process it, the sound of a car engine drifted through the rain. Slow. Approaching. "Raines?" she called softly. No answer. She peeked through the window. A pair of headlights cut through the trees, moving closer. Her chest tightened. Oh God. The engine went quiet, but the lights stayed on. She heard footsteps outside, 2, maybe 3 people. Then a single knock at the door. She backed away, her pulse pounding in her ears. "Raines." He rushed in from the porch, gun drawn. "Stay behind me." The knock came again. Harder this time. Raines peered through the peephole. His jaw clenched. "Who is it?" Danielle whispered. He turned to her slowly, his face pale. "It's not Keller." "Then who?" Before she could finish, a muffled voice came through the door. "Detective Rains? Open up. We need to talk. It's about Keller and your partner." Rains froze. His partner had been dead for years. The voice continued, calm and insistent. "He didn't die the way you think." Danielle's stomach dropped. The world seemed to tilt slightly around her. Rains's hand shook as he unlatched the safety on his gun. Outside, the rain fell harder. And the knocking began again, slow, rhythmic, relentless. The knocks grew louder, echoing through the small cabin until the walls seemed to tremble. Rain streamed down the windows like thin sheets of glass, and thunder rolled somewhere far beyond the trees. Danielle pressed her back against the wall, eyes locked on the door. "Rains, what's happening?" He didn't answer. His jaw tightened, his grip on the gun steady but his eyes distant, haunted. The voice outside called again, louder this time. "Detective Rains. I know you can hear me. This isn't what it looks like. I'm not your enemy." Rains hesitated, then motioned for Danielle to stay put. Slowly, he edged toward the window beside the door and peeled the curtain back an inch. A man stood in the rain, drenched to the bone, holding a badge in one hand and a flashlight in the other. The beam flickered against his soaked jacket, catching a glimpse of his face, young, tense, and vaguely familiar. "Police," the man shouted. "Agent Tyler Briggs, Bureau Task Force." He held his ID up to the window. "We've been tracking Keller for months. I know he's targeting you." Rains opened the door halfway, gun still raised. "Step inside, slowly." Briggs obeyed, dripping water onto the wooden floor. He glanced around quickly before lowering his hood. "You have no idea how hard it was to find you. Keller's been 2 steps ahead of everyone." Rains studied him. "You said something about my partner." Briggs nodded grimly. "Yeah. Detective Morris. The official report said Keller killed him in a shootout during his first arrest attempt, right?" Rains's eyes narrowed. "That's right." "Well," Briggs said, reaching into his jacket, "that's not the full story." He pulled out a flash drive sealed in a plastic bag. "This was recovered from Keller's old apartment last week. It has footage from that night, the night Morris died." Rains took the drive, his knuckles white. How did Keller even have this? Briggs looked at Danielle, then back at Rains. "You might want to see it before I answer that." Minutes later, the three of them huddled around an old laptop on the cabin's table. The screen glowed dimly as the video loaded. The footage was shaky, shot from a dashcam. It showed a dark industrial yard, rain pouring, police sirens faint in the distance. Rains's voice could be heard faintly over the audio, shouting orders. Then another voice, Morris's, cut through the static. "He's heading for the containers. Rains, this way." A blur of movement. Then the camera jolted. A gunshot. Another. When the picture steadied, a man, Thomas Keller, was visible in the distance, hands raised, shouting something inaudible. Morris ran toward him. Then came a third figure. Someone in plain clothes, stepping out from behind a stack of crates. The muzzle flash lit the rain for a split second. Morris fell. Rains froze the video, staring at the still frame. Danielle's voice trembled. That wasn't Keller who shot him. Rains leaned closer. The face of the shooter was half-lit by the flash, barely visible, but enough. Briggs lowered his voice. The Bureau enhanced that frame. The shooter's ID came back to someone inside your department. Rains's eyes widened. You're saying? Your old captain, Briggs finished quietly. Captain Leland Shore. The name hit Rains like a gut punch. Shore had been his mentor, the one who'd handled the Keller case from day one. Why? Rains whispered. Why would he? Because Keller had something on him, Briggs said. Evidence of a cover-up involving federal contracts and kickbacks. Keller tried to expose it after losing his job, but Shore buried the case, and made him the villain. That's why Keller disappeared. That's why he came back. Danielle sank into the nearest chair, her mind spinning. So Keller wasn't after revenge, he was trying to prove the truth all along? Rains nodded slowly, his face pale. And we've been chasing a man who might not be the monster we thought. Briggs exhaled. There's more. The Bureau traced recent communications between Shore and an unknown number. We believe Keller's been reaching out, trying to get proof from someone close to him. He turned to Danielle. That someone might be you. Danielle's pulse quickened. Me? Why me? Because you were there at the beginning, Rains said. You were the one person who could confirm his story. The storm outside raged harder, thunder shaking the small cabin. For a moment, the power flickered. Then a faint buzz came from the laptop. A new message appeared on the screen. No sender. No subject. Just a line of text. You're not the only ones watching. The camera light on the laptop blinked on. Danielle gasped. He's hacked us. Briggs lunged for the cord, but before he could pull it, the screen went black, then came back to life, showing live footage from inside the cabin. A camera feed, from somewhere in the room. Rains spun, scanning the walls, the lamps, the corners. His gaze stopped on the bookshelf where Danielle had found the old photo frame. He grabbed it, flipped it over, and found a tiny lens embedded inside. Damn it, he muttered, smashing it against the table. Danielle stepped back, her voice shaking. He's been here before. Rains looked at her, the weight of it all sinking in. He's been ahead of us the entire time. And outside, through the rain, a faint glow moved between the trees, headlights. Getting closer. The rain outside roared like an ocean, drumming against the windows, drowning out everything except the pounding of their hearts. Danielle stood frozen near the table, her eyes fixed on the faint lights moving through the trees. The glow flickered, disappeared, then reappeared, closer. Rains grabbed his gun and peered through the window. Stay down, he said sharply. Briggs, lights off. Now. Briggs moved fast, plunging the cabin into darkness. Only the lightning outside offered brief, silver flashes of the world beyond, the trees bending, the wind howling, and the distant sound of gravel crunching under tires. Danielle's voice came out a whisper. Is it him? Rains didn't answer. He was listening. Counting the pauses between the sounds. Then, suddenly, silence. The engine had stopped. Briggs crept toward the door, weapon ready. We need to move to the back exit. If it's Keller, he's not alone. Rains nodded. Danielle, stay close. But before they could move, a knock echoed through the cabin. Not loud, not frantic, just deliberate. 3 slow, heavy taps. Danielle's pulse spiked. No, not again. Rains aimed his weapon toward the door. Identify yourself. For a moment, nothing. Then a voice, deep, steady, calm. It's me, Detective Thomas Keller. The sound froze them all. Danielle's breath hitched. Oh my God. I don't want to hurt anyone, the voice continued. I just want you to hear the truth before someone else buries it again. Briggs shook his head. He's manipulating us. We can't open that door. Rains motioned for silence. He stepped closer to the door, keeping his weapon low but ready. If you really want to talk, Keller, drop your weapon and step into the light. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating a tall figure standing just beyond the porch. Keller. His hair was longer, his face older, but his eyes, those same calm, piercing eyes, were unmistakable. He held no gun. Only a small leather folder in his hand. This, he said, holding it up, is everything. Proof of what your captain did. Proof of why I was ruined. Rains hesitated, torn between duty and curiosity. Briggs hissed, we can't trust him. He could have a trigger or backup waiting in the dark. But Danielle stepped forward, voice trembling but firm. He's right about one thing. Someone is burying the truth. And if we don't listen now, we may never know what really happened. Rains looked at her. You don't have to do this. I do, she said softly. Because this started with me. He opened the door slowly. Keller stepped inside, dripping rain onto the floor. He looked exhausted, haunted, but there was something undeniably human about him, something that didn't match the monster she'd imagined all these years. He placed the folder gently on the table. Everything I said was true, he began. Leland Shore ran a network of contracts through shell companies. When I discovered it, he made sure I disappeared. He used the harassment report to finish me off. Rains's jaw tightened. And you think that excuses the chaos you've caused? Keller met his stare. You think I wanted any of this? I lost everything, my job, my family, my name. You can't imagine what it's like to be erased. Briggs interjected, and Morris? You didn't shoot him? Keller shook his head. No. Shore did. Then pinned it on me. He thought he'd killed 2 problems at once. He turned to Danielle. You were the key. The moment you filed your statement, everything fell into place for them. They needed you to believe I was a danger. You were their credibility. Danielle's throat tightened. I thought I was protecting myself. Keller's expression softened. You were. You were scared. They made sure of that. Rains opened the folder. Inside were contracts, photos, and wire transfers, all bearing Captain Shore's name. But there was more, a signed confession, undated, typed but clearly his voice. In the matter of Thomas Keller, I accept full responsibility for falsified records and manipulation of evidence to secure his termination. Rains's hands shook. This is enough to bring him down. Briggs leaned closer. Then why come here? Why not go to the Bureau? Keller sighed. Because the Bureau already knows. Half of them are on Shore's payroll. The moment I sent anything through official channels, it vanished. I needed witnesses who weren't compromised. Danielle stared at him, realization dawning. That's why you reached out to me. Not to punish me, but to trust me. Keller nodded slowly. You were the only person left who ever told the truth, even when it hurt. For a moment, the air felt lighter. As if the storm outside had finally begun to break. But then, a gunshot shattered the stillness. Glass exploded from the window beside them, and Briggs fell backward with a cry, clutching his shoulder. "Sniper!" Rains shouted, dragging Danielle to the floor. Keller dove behind the table, scanning the trees through the rain. "He found us," he growled. "Sure." Rains yelled. "Who else?" Keller snapped. "He'll burn this whole place down before letting this evidence reach daylight." Bullets tore through the wooden walls. The lamps shattered. Sparks flew from the wires above. Danielle pressed her hands over her ears, the roar of gunfire blending with thunder. Rains crawled to Briggs, checking his pulse. "He's alive. We have to move now." Keller grabbed the folder, shoving it into Danielle's hands. "Take it. If I don't make it out, you bring this to someone you trust, someone clean." "I'm not leaving you," she shouted. He looked at her, eyes fierce but calm. "You already saved a life once. Don't waste that second chance." He turned toward the door, gun drawn, ready to face the storm. Rains followed, covering his flank. The rain outside was a curtain of chaos, flashes of lightning, echoes of gunfire, and shadows moving between the trees. Danielle hesitated only a moment before running after them, clutching the folder tight against her chest. As she reached the doorway, another shot rang out, and the world went white. The world snapped back into motion with the smell of gunpowder and rain. Danielle blinked through the haze, her ears ringing, vision blurred. The thunder had swallowed everything, the forest, the sky, even her own breath. Then, through the smoke and flashes, she saw Keller. He was crouched behind the fallen porch beam, returning fire into the darkness. Rains was beside him, bleeding from a cut across his forehead, shouting orders she could barely hear. "Move around the side," he yelled. "We'll flank him." Keller nodded, then turned to Danielle. "Stay low. Don't let go of that folder, no matter what happens." She gripped it tighter, nodding through tears. From the tree line came another burst of gunfire, rapid, precise. Whoever was shooting knew exactly what he was doing. The bullets ripped through the cabin walls, splinters flying. Briggs groaned from inside, trying to drag himself toward cover. Keller and Rains split off, moving fast and silent through the storm, the rain masking their steps. The lightning flashed again, briefly revealing a figure near the SUV at the edge of the clearing. Captain Leland Shore. He looked almost serene standing there, the rain soaking his coat, his rifle steady in his hands. His face was expressionless, but his eyes burned with cold fury. Rains raised his gun. "Drop it, Captain. It's over." Shore smirked. "No, Detective, it's just beginning. You think you've cornered me with Keller's lies and that girl's guilt? You have no idea how deep this goes." He fired again, one shot, clean and sharp. The bullet tore through Keller's shoulder, spinning him backward. "Tom!" Danielle screamed. Keller hit the ground hard but rolled behind the SUV, clutching his arm. "He's mine," he hissed through clenched teeth. Rains took cover, returning fire. The storm turned the night into chaos, flashes of light, gunfire, the hiss of rain on metal. Then, in the confusion, Keller rose slowly, blood mixing with the rain on his sleeve. He held his weapon tight, but his voice carried steady through the storm. "You ruined my life, Shore. You turned my name into poison. But tonight, everyone learns the truth." Shore laughed bitterly. "Truth? You think anyone cares about truth? They'll remember you as a traitor and me as a decorated officer." "Not this time," Keller said. "Because she's still standing." He glanced toward Danielle, who was watching from the doorway, soaked, trembling, clutching the folder like a lifeline. Shore followed his gaze, and for the first time, there was a flicker of fear in his eyes. "Danielle," he said coldly, "you're making a mistake. Those papers mean nothing. They'll destroy your career, your safety, everything." But she stepped forward into the rain, voice shaking yet firm. "I already lost everything once because of you. I won't be silent again." Her words seemed to crack something in the air. Shore raised his rifle, but before he could aim, Keller fired. The sound was thunder inside thunder. The captain's weapon flew from his hands as he staggered backward, falling to his knees. The rain poured harder, washing the blood from his sleeve into the mud. Rains moved quickly, kicking the rifle away and cuffing him. "Leland Shore, you're under arrest for conspiracy, falsification of evidence, and murder." Shore laughed weakly, even as the cuffs clicked shut. "You think you've won? You don't know who you're up against." Keller lowered his gun, breathing heavily. "I know exactly who you are." The police sirens grew louder in the distance, finally. Red and blue lights reflected against the wet ground, slicing through the dark forest. Danielle fell to her knees beside Keller, pressing a hand against his wound. "Stay with me, please." He smiled faintly. "Guess. I finally did something right." "Don't say that," she whispered. "You're going to be okay." He reached up, his hand trembling, and brushed her cheek. "You found the truth, Danielle. That's all that matters." Then his eyes slipped closed. Rains pressed his fingers against Keller's neck. There was still a pulse, faint but there. "He's alive. Hold on, Keller." Paramedics rushed in moments later, lifting him onto a stretcher. Danielle clutched the folder tightly, refusing to let go until an officer promised to deliver it to Internal Affairs. As they carried Keller away, Rains turned to her. "You did good. You saved a lot of lives tonight." She shook her head, tears mixing with the rain. "He saved mine first." Hours later, the storm finally broke. The forest was quiet, the air heavy with the scent of wet earth and burnt wood. Danielle stood by the ambulance, wrapped in a blanket, watching as they drove Keller away under flashing lights. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't dared to hope for, peace. But beneath that peace was sorrow. Keller might survive, but he'd never get back the years that had been stolen. None of them would. Rains approached her quietly. "Internal Affairs has everything. Shore's going down. And with his statement, we'll finally clear Keller's name." She nodded slowly. "Maybe now he'll get to live again." Rains looked out at the dark road. "Funny thing about the truth, it doesn't just set you free. Sometimes, it burns everything else to ash first." Danielle managed a faint smile. "Then maybe ash is a good place to start over." The sun rose slowly over Charlotte, North Carolina, casting soft gold through the hospital windows. The chaos of that stormy night had faded into quiet recovery, the kind of silence that felt earned. Danielle sat beside the hospital bed, hands folded, watching the heart monitor blink in a steady rhythm. Keller lay still, pale but alive, his shoulder bandaged, his breathing even. It had been 4 days since the raid. 4 days of interviews, news headlines, and long hours with investigators who finally pieced together the truth. Captain Leland Shore's arrest had made national news, decorated officer arrested in conspiracy scandal. The department had been shaken to its core, but for once, the truth wasn't buried. Danielle leaned forward and whispered, "You kept your promise, Tom. You came back." His eyelids fluttered. Then, slowly, he opened them. "Guess I don't break all my promises." She laughed softly through tears. "You scared everyone half to death." "Wouldn't be the first time," he said weakly, a shadow of his old humor returning. The door opened, and Detective Raines stepped in, holding a cup of coffee in one hand and a thin folder in the other. Well, Sleeping Beauty's awake." Keller gave a tired grin. "You still can't resist making an entrance, can you?" Raines chuckled, then looked at Danielle. "Internal Affairs finished their review. You're officially cleared. They want you back on the task force when you're ready, said your testimony helped crack the whole operation wide open." Danielle froze. "Me?" He nodded. "You were the one who kept fighting, even when everyone else walked away. Keller may have uncovered the truth, but you gave it a voice." Keller turned his head slightly, meeting her eyes. "Told you. She's the bravest person I know." Danielle's chest tightened. "I just did what was right." Raines smiled. "That's the rarest thing anyone can do." He set the folder down beside Keller. "And one more thing, your record's been cleared, Tom. Officially. The charges, the suspension, everything. You've got your name back." Keller stared at him in disbelief. "After all these years?" "It's done," Raines said simply. "Took a hell of a storm to wash it clean, but we got there." Later that evening, Danielle walked out of the hospital with Keller slowly following behind, his arm in a sling. The air was crisp, the streets still wet from the last bit of rain. They stopped at a small park across the street. The same kind of park where it had all started years ago, the day she had saved that child without knowing it would change her life forever. Keller sat on a bench, breathing in deeply. "You ever think about that night?" "Every day," she said softly. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't stopped to help." "You would have kept walking," Keller said. "And someone else would have been gone forever. The world's funny that way. One decision, and everything shifts." Danielle smiled faintly. "You really think it was fate?" He shrugged. "I think it was kindness. And kindness changes everything." They sat there for a while, listening to the city come alive again, children laughing in the distance, a bus rolling past, the hum of life moving on. After a moment, Danielle pulled a small envelope from her coat pocket. "This came this morning. It's from the family of that little boy I saved. They somehow found my address." She handed it to him. He opened it carefully. Inside was a photo of a smiling young boy, now maybe 10 years old, standing in front of a school building, holding a baseball glove. On the back were 5 handwritten words. "Thank you for my life." Keller's throat tightened. "He looks happy." Danielle nodded. "He is. His mother said he's starting Little League next spring." Keller smiled faintly. Then I'd say we did okay. She looked at him curiously. We? You weren't even there that night. He met her eyes. Doesn't matter. You saved a life, and I saved the truth. Sometimes those things are the same. A few weeks later, spring settled over Charlotte. The case was officially closed. Shore had confessed to his crimes in exchange for leniency, but it didn't matter. The damage was done, and the truth had healed more than it had broken. Danielle returned to work, though things felt different now. She carried herself lighter, not with pride, but with peace. The people around her noticed it, the quiet strength, the calm certainty that came from surviving something greater than fear. One afternoon, as she was packing up her desk, Keller appeared in the doorway, holding 2 coffees. "Don't tell me you're retiring already," he teased. She smiled. "Not a chance. Just reorganizing." He handed her one of the cups. "Then let's make it official. New beginnings." She lifted her cup and clinked it gently against his. New beginnings. That night, as she drove home, the city lights shimmered on the pavement. She passed by the intersection where she had first seen that lost child years ago. For a moment, she slowed down, letting the memory wash over her, the panic, the courage, the heartbeat that had driven her to act without thinking. She whispered under her breath, "Thank you for showing me who I could be." And somewhere deep in her heart, she felt an answer, not in words, but in warmth. Months later, a knock echoed at her door one quiet morning. Danielle opened it and froze. Standing there was the boy from the photo, a little taller now, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. Behind him stood his mother, eyes filled with emotion. He looked up at her shyly. "My mom said I should say this in person." Danielle smiled gently. "Say what?" He took a breath. "Thank you, for saving me." Her eyes glistened as she knelt down. "You don't need to thank me, sweetheart. Just promise me you'll do something kind for someone else someday." He nodded quickly. "I will." His mother stepped forward, hugging Danielle tightly. "We'll never forget what you did." When they left, Danielle stood there for a long time, the flowers still in her hand. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, warm and golden, filling her home with light. And for the first time in years, she felt whole.